Uh, Good evening and welcome to today's meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, the place where you are in the know. You can find the club online at the commonwealthclub.org on Facebook and Twitter and on the club's YouTube channel. I'm Fred Blackwell, CEO of the San Francisco Foundation and your chair for today's program. This program is sponsored by the San Francisco Foundation as part of a series focused in on addressing inclusion and equity in the Bay Area by focusing in on supporting activities and strategies that are really zeroing in on people, place, and power. Today's program, as it was said a little bit earlier, is entitled The Future of Work. We think that work is a key component of any strategy that really has equity at the center of it. But at the same time, we feel like there are a lot of challenges here in the Bay Area. Diversity is lacking in a number of key sectors. Jobs that support a middle-class lifestyle seem to be shrinking. And innovations in technology seem to be changing the very nature of work. In fact, as we sit here, the feeling among a lot of people is that there's a lot of economic opportunity, wealth being generated, economic growth, but access to that is not broadly shared. And so among the things that we're going to talk about is how to change that, also talk about what's on the horizon, and the panel is going to tackle those and a variety of other issues. Without going into much more, what I want to do is actually introduce the panel to you, and when I'm done, I'm going to turn it over to Joshua Johnson on the side, who's going to be moderating tonight's discussion, but it's a pleasure to see everybody here. I will start with Orson Aguilar. Orson is the president of the Greenlining Institute, one of the nation's largest and most successful multi-ethnic advocacy and leadership development nonprofits. Greenlining envisions a nation where race is never a barrier to economic opportunity and communities of color can thrive. Under Orson's leadership, Greenlining has become a leading voice in the movement to fight redlining by advocating for greenlining policies, particularly in the areas of the economy, the environment, health, energy, voting, and telecommunications. Tim O'Reilly, who is next to him, is the founder and CEO of O'Reilly Media and a partner at the early stage venture firm O'Reilly Alpha Tech Ventures. He is also on the boards of Maker Media and Code for America. Tim has a history of convening conversations that reshape the computer industry. In 2004, he defined how Web 2.0 represented a new model for the computer industry. In 2009, with his Government 2.0 Summit, he framed the conversation about the modernization of government technology that spawned initiatives at the federal, state, local level, and around the world. Next to him is Carmen Rojas. She's breaking up the monotony of the males on the panel. She is the CEO. She is the CEO of the Workers Lab, an innovation lab that invests in entrepreneurs, community organizers, and technologists to develop new ways to build power for working people in the United States. Prior to assuming this position, Carmen was the acting director of collective impact at Living Cities, where she worked with 22 of the largest foundations and financial institutions in the world. And finally, Jim Wunderman is the president and CEO of the Bay Area Council, a CEO-led public policy organization focused on making the San Francisco Bay Area and Silicon Valley the most globally competitive and economically productive region in the world. Since becoming president and CEO in 2004, Jim has honed the Bay Area Council's regionalist approach to advocacy in key areas that impact the Bay Area's economy. And with Jim at the helm, the council has also continued its tradition of working in partnerships to bridge the divides between economic, environmental, and social equity interests. And finally, our moderator today, Joshua Johnson, is the creator and host of Truth Be Told, a national series on race and culture from KQED Public Radio, distributed nationally by PRI, which is the Public Radio International. He is also a lecturer at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. Joshua has spent nearly 6 years at KQED, primarily as its morning newscaster. Prior to that, he was the anchor reporter in his native South Florida, and has also contributed to NPR newscasts, CBS Radio News, and Public Radio's Business Program Marketplace. Please welcome all the guests as I turn it over to Joshua Johnson.
Thank you, Fred. Good evening. Welcome to the club. We are glad to have you all here to talk about an issue that literally affects every single one of us here. If you've ever heard any of your friends complain about how hard it is to live in the Bay Area, and I'm going to have to move somewhere, and I got to find out another place to be, and I'm not sure I can hang on here much longer, then this conversation is definitely for you. We welcome your questions along that line, especially if those questions affect you. Maybe you have some questions about the way that you work, the way that you recruit, the way that you hire, the way that you try to ascend in your career, or just whether or not you can afford to hang on here and what it would take to make that happen. So get ready to fill out those question and comment cards in just a moment after we begin with our panel. Orson, Tim, Carmen, Jim, welcome. Glad to have you all here. Let's start off by casting a vision for this conversation. We're here to talk about an equitable, sustainable workforce for the Bay Area. What does that look like? Are we talking about everyone being employed? Are we talking about a guaranteed income? Are we talking about a guaranteed social safety net? All of the above and then some? Let's just go down the line and have each of you paint a picture of the ideal Bay Area workforce as you see it. Orson, Aguilar, what might that look like?
Great question. Thank you for having me. I'm going to start very simple. So looking 10, 15 years out, if we succeed in our vision, something simple still happens. Oakland is still diverse. That's an important marker for many of us, that the diversity we have is not there, but is perhaps even more robust. So I would start with that. And for us, that's an underlying indicator that if we're able to keep this diversity in a very economically vibrant system, which we think the Bay Area will be, then mission accomplished.
Tim O'Reilly?
Yeah, I'm a technologist, so I'm going to think about this from the point of view of how technology helps in this goal. And right now, technology is largely seen as hurting the interests of working people, increasing gentrification. And it doesn't have to be that way. As my friend David Rolfe, who Carmen also knows, once said, God did not make being an auto worker a good job. We have to make choices. This was, the result of hard choices and a lot of struggle was what gave us, good middle-class jobs in this country for a long time. And then a different set of choices have led us down the path of lousy jobs and increased inequality. And so the thing I'm trying to figure out, and I'm working through an event I'm called the Next Economy Summit, is how can technology help us to create better jobs? And to me, there are three ways that it can do that, and this relates very much to your question. One is you can upskill workers. You can actually find ways for them to do things that were previously impossible. Uber's moving in just about across the street. Uber actually has created a lot of jobs. They're not yet as good as they could be. By using technology to do something that was unthinkable only a few years ago, that you could just call a car at any spot and bing, they can pick you up. And drivers will know where to take you because there's an app. They don't actually have to know. And I go, that design pattern should be replicated across the economy where we say, wow, what else needs doing? And I think about, we look around us and we go, there's so much that needs doing. Why aren't we using technology to help us do it, as opposed to the relentless choice that the goal of technology is to cut costs and replace people? Why aren't we empowering them to do things that we couldn't do before? And so in my economy of the future, we are focused relentlessly on work that needs doing and how technology can help people to do it. And we're focused on how these new technology platforms enable the kind of city that when we say that's a great city, it's diverse, it's got a rich ecosystem of all kinds of unique, special human services, and you go, platforms can actually help that to happen.
Carmen Rojas?
For me and for our work at the Workers Lab, we are really focused on three very fundamental things. One, from the worker perspective, We think it's unconscionable that working people in this country and in this region work 40 hours a week and have to make the choices between food and rent or healthcare and childcare. And so ideally what we're working for is a region where working people can work 40 hours and provide for their families and save money and pay a mortgage. To Tim's point, we also think that the role of government isn't to sort of over-regulate or to hinder innovation, but it can't be all on the back of working people. So we see a lot of promise from the most practical things like raising wages to actually be able to provide people with enough money to make ends meet and live and thrive, to exploring things like universal basic income in certain cities. And then we were created by a labor union interested in imagining what the next generation working people's movement in this country would look like. And I think in retrospect, one of the things that David, who is my co-founder, that Tim mentioned, often talks about is that we have an adversarial relationship with the economy and with business leaders, and we see a lot of promise in being able to transform the economy to be able to create opportunity. So exploring things like co-op creation, co-ownership, employee stock ownership programs, places where we can actually deepen a relationship with leaders in the economy so that we can all thrive.
Jim Wunderman?
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for having me. So, I appreciate the comments of the panelists. I represent major business organizations, and I think, throughout them, there's just a growing interest in exploring that vision. And I think there's a great recognition amongst everyone that we have a great economy in the Bay Area that's grown and is the envy of places around the country and around the world. And when you travel a little bit, it's easy to see that. But at the same time, the success of the economy has been it's been unequal, and poverty. There's just more of a gap, and it's very evident. It's hurting people, and it's changing communities, and it's doing it fast. So I think as business leaders, we need to work in collaboration with other community leaders, and it's a tough question because technology is such a change agent and things are happening so quickly and unpredictably. And the cost of housing is probably the biggest factor in enhancing poverty. People's incomes are rising, but not nearly quick enough to handle the cost of the increases in the cost of housing. So I think having a housing situation in the future, a decade or two out, we can do this, where a house, a nice home is something that kind of goes with the life of the Bay Area. And it's not something you get kicked out of, but you get to choose from. Would be something that's hard to imagine right now, but I think that's possible. And transportation, we shouldn't be disconnected because we have an insufficient mass transportation system where we force people into long commutes and automobile trips. So those are things which affect the quality of life. They separate families. So I think having these are things the Bay Area Council works on a lot, along with improving the education system, early education, having families be able to have a more equal chance that their kids are going to succeed. The issues around gender, we've made a lot of progress. We still have a long way to go with that, but our economy has actually been beefed up in a tremendous way by the participation of women in it. We probably wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for women in the economy. And then you have focus on areas like that we're focusing on with other groups, like boys and men of color, where you look at particular elements of the society where people are just flat out being left behind. And I think it's up to business leaders first, but government and others to come together with solutions. And we're committed to doing that. So I think we have a lot to learn, though, from everybody about how to do this, because the problems that we face are different than anything we faced before. We need to recognize that.
Jim, let me stay with you. I would assume that your members at the Bay Area Council are by and large thrilled with the state of the economy right now. Things have been going gangbusters for some time. There's some talk of when the VC bubble is going to burst in Silicon Valley, but no one is saying that the money is going away. The money is there. So the economy is really good. What would make it even better from the perspective of your members, based on the vision that they have for the Bay Area's workforce? What's at the top of their wish list?
these business leaders, they're never thrilled. They always complain, and they're always hungry for the next thing. But there is a tremendous difficulty with the workforce and filling the gaps in the workforce, whether it's middle skilled jobs or high-end jobs. It's harder and harder to find workers, and they're screaming about that problem. The mobility issues, people are just stuck in place, whether it's BART or the freeway system or local roads. There's a lot of complaint about that. So I think that the business leaders are seeing the effect of the success that we've had. They certainly recognize it and have benefited from it, but they also know problems when they see them, and I think really want to come together maybe in a different way to address things on a bigger scale, a more visionary scale, maybe engage in the kind of conversation we're having.
So part of it is just being able to work with the community to maybe address the more, I don't want to say negative. Negative is a little bit too judgmental, it's a little bit too subjective. To address some of the side effects of all the success, where it hasn't equally benefited everybody, and what you're saying is your members are attuned to that and they're ready to help.
Yeah, because the workforce that the companies now attract are far more socially conscious than before. So if they've missed it, their employees aren't missing it. So I think there's a great recognition of the problems that we're talking about tonight, and I believe that there's an emerging strong desire on the part of the business community at large, which is not just business leaders but people who work, to get around some of these issues and get involved in them. I think we've done not as good a job as we could do in creating the pathways and engaging people as well as we could. I think that's a challenge we have, because I don't think necessarily the business leader wants to, in a particular company, wants to figure this out. They want to participate with others and be shown the way. And so I think that's upon us to do.
We'll be going to audience questions in just a little bit. I see that I'm beginning to get a few cards very surreptitiously that I will start going through. So please keep the cards coming, and I will start asking some of your questions in a moment. And I look forward to more of the conversation with the panel. Feel free to jump in, and we'll mix it up and try to make this as interesting and useful as possible. Carmen Rojas, let me come to you. It seems like the nature of worker empowerment, this changing face of the workforce and the worker as an actor in the workforce is changing, which is why the Workers Lab exists. I mean, it's not like factory town where there's Ford and there's the union of people that work at Ford.
Right.
Every company isn't built the same here. So innovation is kind of necessary for workers to keep up. Talk about some of the innovations you're seeing in terms of, I don't want to use the term labor organizing, because that can feel kind of restrictive and maybe overly specific.
Collective action.
Say again?
Collective action.
Collective action. Thank you. I knew you'd have the right term. Talk about what
Worker
you're
voice
seeing.
is another good word.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Talk about what you're seeing in terms of collective action to allow workers to be empowered, even as the economy is changing all around them.
Right, so one of the things that we keep seeing, or the promise that we keep seeing with regard to the role that technology has played, is a way to break down the barriers of the space between workers who often work in fragmented workplaces. So there's an amazing organization called coworker.org, which allows workers in franchises to develop a collective agenda and change the nature of their workplace. Last year, they were part of our accelerator, and they worked with 25,000 Starbucks employees to increase wages, end the poor practices in scheduling, where they had workers opening and closing the coffee shop. So technology is one promising way. I think another promising way that we have seen and that we're really involved in this year is sort of this new economy, this idea that there isn't only one way to do business. And I think the Bay Area is really rich with examples of new ways of doing business, but we are working in partnership with an asset management company in the Central Valley to convert a farm. It's like a straight up old school ag, a grape and date farm with 7,000 mostly undocumented workers into a co-op. It would be the largest co-op in the country. These are people who daily face some of the worst conditions in the state and in the country in workplaces. And this creates, the conversion into a co-op for us creates an amazing example for how, for the most vulnerable workers, there are these new economic economic models where workers are taking collective action, both as workers but also as owners, as true participants in our economy, and shaping what the future looks like. I think I really appreciate your framing conversation in the back about wanting to have solutions. I think we're at a moment that is really ripe with economic solutions, and the questions that we have at the Workers Lab are how do we make sure that those solutions exist at scale, and how do we make sure those solutions are sustainable, free of charity and free of philanthropy.
It seems like part of the, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like part of the challenge is getting workers to think about business in a different way. You know, I mean, I've been active in unions before. I work at a station that's unionized, and so I had to learn about business when I got involved in just our union to negotiate our contract. But I can imagine it can be a little daunting for a worker who not only has to begin to work collectively, but who suddenly has to learn how business works from the other side of the desk. Like, that can be a tall order, maybe.
I actually don't think so. So I'll continue with the farm worker story. It's amazing the appetite there is for engagement and ownership for collective action. It's amazing how working people, again, who experience some of the worst working conditions in the state and the country, have sort of stepped up and said, we are willing to act as partners with the owners of this company to set a course forward that can make sure that our kids can grow up in the same place so that we're not seasonal employees, that can make sure that we can buy a house, that can make sure that we can provide for our families and create a nest egg. It's really, that isn't the difficult thing. I think for me, the difficult thing, I'm going to invite myself to answer this question, is that in the 20th century, collective bargaining, so unionizing workplaces was really easy. You're right, like there was a company town, but it was also a blunt instrument, that the only way that you could collectively take action as a worker was through a union. And now we're seeing a lot of opportunity to think about all of the other ways that working people can take collective action, not only in conflict with employers, but in partnership and in co-creation with employers.
Tim O'Reilly, let me talk to you about technology. You spent more than 3 decades watching and promoting the cutting edge of technology. And as you alluded to in the beginning, there's a real sense among some people that we are just inexorably working our way toward Skynet. That the ultimate goal, thank you, Terminator fans, I appreciate that, that the Borg, is that better? Like, does that? Mildly, okay. That the goal, the point is to just kind of wipe out as many jobs as possible and make the entire world as robotic and digital as can be made for the benefit of the richest among us. And you talked about the choices that had to be made. You alluded to the fact that we have to make choices to prevent that from happening. Talk about what those choices are and who actually has the power to make them.
Yeah. Well, first off, every entrepreneur, has a choice for the kind of business they set out to do. There's this, one of my favorite tweets of all time was from an anonymous tweeter who's now come out, but whose handle was Startup L. Jackson, and he said, the Uberification of everything is turning San Francisco into an assisted living community for the young. And, and you think about that and you go, there were all these entrepreneurs.
I'm kind of offended by that. I don't know how I feel.
There were all these entrepreneurs who were saying, well, we'll be the Uber of dry cleaning. I mean, man, what a pain in the ass it is to take your dry cleaning in, or, we'll bring you food, it's just like, give me a break. And then there are entrepreneurs who are saying, actually, let's reinvent elder care. Let's make it really much better and easier, and help the caregivers of our aging populations to be paid better and to have better working conditions. And which of those two businesses do you think actually is being more successful, the Uber of dry cleaning or this company called Honor, which is basically about aging with honor? Which one of them do you think worked better? Honor is on a tear. They've raised $52 million. Washio is out of business already. after burning up $17 million of venture capital, money. Now, I guess that's redistribution of capitalist money into the local economy because they probably, all their workers kind of went to fancy restaurants and spent it, whatever. But they did also probably inflate housing a little bit in the process. But, that's the first and most essential choice, is for entrepreneurs to work on stuff that matters. And the second, because actually stuff that matters, the real work that needs doing is the stuff that will be most successful. When Google said, let's give everybody access to all the world's information, that was like pretty awesome idea, that would make the world a better place. And guess what? They turned it into an amazing business because it was doing something useful. And
well, wait, let me stop you on that for just a second, because I can hear some entrepreneurs in their hearts going like, how dare you look down on what I was trying to do? Dry cleaning is an important business too. And feeling like there's a value judgment built into that about what's useful and what's important to society, and we have to focus on these things.
No, I don't think it's really just good business judgment. Are you solving a real problem that is hard?
Well, but Instagram wasn't solving a real problem that was hard.
Actually,
Snapchat definitely isn't solving a problem.
Actually, I'm not sure that that's actually correct, because it's sort of interesting. A huge part of our economy is entertainment, is sharing. And, when I think of applications that made a huge difference in my life, Instagram is one of them. It's how I keep up with my grandchildren. It's like every day I'm looking there, and I have so much better contact, with my extended family, nieces and nephews, brothers and sisters, than I ever had before. And it's achieved a really important goal, and that's why it works as a business. And I think it's actually really important to understand that not everything that's worthwhile is purely utilitarian. In fact, the more we have technology to take care of utilitarian tasks, the more we're going to spend on these added value, creative, caring, sharing kinds of things.
Orson, Aguilar, you work with the Greenlining Institute, which focuses on economic opportunity for people of color. Are there any places that you've seen here in the Bay Area, maybe beyond the Bay Area, nationwide, that are making real progress towards bringing this to pass? What seems to be making it work? Or is no one really hitting the nail on the head yet?
That's a complicated question.
That's why I brought it to you.
Well, we look at, I'm going to say the dirty word up here, even though we're trying to stay optimistic, regulation. So when I look at, and when we look at our toolkit at Greenlining in terms of what works, right? What kind of economies give people of all backgrounds an opportunity? You point to regulation. So we constantly point to a bill that was passed by an African-American woman, Gwen Moore, that required the state utilities to do business with minority-owned businesses. That bill didn't have a quota, it didn't have targets, but it set something in motion that today now a company like PG&E spends over 35 to 40% of their contracts are with women, disabled veteran, or minority-owned businesses, right? So we have a template for that. Problem with that template is if I take that to tech says I'm too innovative for that. Like that's boring, dull, old, right? And so my point with that is that we think the future of jobs needs some old school and some new school, right? The new school stuff, we're not going to be able to stop. The innovation, the robots, the driverless cars driving around Pittsburgh today, that stuff is going to happen. The question is, and somebody brought it up, what are the public policy choices we're going to make so that when it happens in a way that really respects people and their livelihoods and the willingness to just have a job, right? I take a little exception and probably disagree a little bit with Tim. I agreed with everything you said, except for one thing, that Uber is creating jobs, right? So Uber and other gig economy folks who say they're sharing, we think they're the last people sharing, and I'll explain why. Because the the Uber driver or the Lyft driver, they're called partners, which is kind of strange because usually if you're a partner at McKinsey or at Goldman Sachs, you get paid $10 million. If you're a partner at one of these tech companies or gig economy companies, you get your hourly rate, and good luck. Hopefully you get some, and we're going to take a little piece off the top, and we're not going to tell you when we're going to take more or less. You're not going to get any benefits. You don't get any stock. And so for us is how do we also put some heart and innovation into this? You know, how do we get business leaders to say, hey, some of the old school stuff actually worked, right? Like giving healthcare actually makes sense. Giving people pensions or some type of retirement actually makes sense. Whereas right now, the VC model is we're going to fund you, and those of you who have the less of that stuff, right? If you don't have janitors that are on your books, if you have less of that on your books, the more likely you're going to get that capital. And we have to make a huge mind shift that say there's a shared value here. And I don't know how we do that. I'd love to see business leaders pick up the phone and say, hey, we have a huge problem on our hands. Why don't we invest 5% of our research dollars on the future of jobs? Because, you know, when I Googled the future of jobs for this panel today, the first thing I found was a report by the World Economic Forum that says they see $7 to $8 million jobs being lost in the future. And it was so scary how specific they had it. And yes, there are some jobs where we're going to need more people, architects, engineers. But the question is, how are we going to make up for that other $6.7 million jobs lost? And I think that takes some ingenuity, and it's going to take a little bit, again, of the old school. You know, at the same time that you read the New York Times that says we don't have enough engineers, there's another article that says we don't have enough roofers, right? What if we made the public policy decision that we're going to weatherize every old home in California? Imagine how much work that creates into the future for folks who are going to make good living wage jobs in construction. So it takes a little bit of both.
Well, but Orson, hang on a second. From a real world perspective, I hear what you're saying, but it occurs to me that the cynical problem with that is that roofing is just not sexy. Like tech jobs, that's something that fires people up. It makes you look cutting edge. No amount of good PR is going to make people excited that Governor Brown is going to create 100,000 new roofing jobs in California. It's a harder PR
I
sell.
think if you went out on the street right now on Broadway and asked the brother who's the security guard, who works for the Uber of security, if he would want to have a full-time job being a roofer, if that guaranteed him benefits and gave him a good salary, that he would take that job.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about people at that level. I agree. I'm not talking about people at that level. I mean, at a certain high enough policy level, the people who actually sign the forms that move the money, it seems, from the outside at least, like programs that deal with tech, that increase, you know, American competition with other countries in terms of innovation around the world, like that's what gets people on a visceral level at the top fired up. And people, you know, day to day, sure, roofers, plumbers, people who build roads, we got a bad need for that. But policymakers, they're not fired up about that.
We did 1 million solar roofs a few years ago. Now that was some roofing that got people fired up, and it got people a lot of work.
Yeah.
So there's different ways to look at it.
Okay, how does that kind of thing come together? What does it take to make that kind of a program come together?
Well, you know, for one thing, in California, you know, we have invested heavily in a future with reduced greenhouse gases, and there's a tremendous opportunity to create workforces around that, and it's already happening, and it will happen far, far more. How we plan for it is a great question, and that's an opportunity. But California will lead the country and the world in the creation of jobs around making the planet a better place. And you know, I think this is something that we, you know, our business group, we were the first one to support AB 32 back in 2006. A lot of people said, well, that's going to be bad for business. We said, well, maybe, but business likes to take a risk. And we took that risk, and I think it was a good risk, and a lot of regulations have occurred since that time, and additional laws, which are taking California in this position, and we should take full advantage of the work opportunities associated with that to create sometimes sexy, maybe sometimes less sexy, but you know, jobs that pay people a good wage, that have upwardly mobile opportunities for people. Look, I'm afraid too about what's happening. I see the reports, we're going to lose millions of jobs to automation largely, and I think we have to think about how to replace those and even add to that.
Can I jump in on the we're going to lose millions of jobs to automation? I think it's somewhat overstated. I mean, take the self-driving cars and trucks. There's been a huge, a lot of fear-mongering about that. I've actually started recently doing some thinking about Uber and self-driving cars and just doing some back-of-the-napkin math. And it seems to me that it will be more expensive for Uber because they will have to own the cars. They will have to maintain the cars. Right now, they get that for free, right? The real rationale for Uber doing self-driving cars goes back to your point. It's sexy. It's cool. It will drive their valuation. I don't think it's actually necessarily a better business. No. It's sort of, and maybe it fits with the whole competitive back and forth with, well, who's going to take the lead there and where is it going to go eventually, and there's a long-term play there, but it's going to be a long time. I don't think that, sure, you're going to get the self-driving features in existing cars, but just think about the self-driving Tesla. Okay, how many Teslas are out there? How long is it going to take to replace the 100, of millions of cars in this country with the self-driving version? A long time.
Well, I'm not going to advise my kids to go into the driver industry.
No, absolutely not, and you shouldn't. And I'm not saying that. But the idea that this is going to happen eventually, blinds us to the fact that there's a long way between here and there. We fly in self-driving airplanes, and they still have pilots. There's choices that get made about these things, why we do it the way we do it. It's not necessarily going to go as easily as sort of the techno-optimists or the techno fear-mongers say.
And by the way, I wanted to, by way of context, Jim Wunderman, you had mentioned AB 32. AB 32 is the state law that calls on California to reduce its carbon emissions to its mid-90s levels by the end of this decade. For those of you who are
and that's how you create jobs, by having a big mission that requires work to be done.
You are listening to the Commonwealth Club of California program, and we are discussing the future of work. You just heard from Tim O'Reilly, a venture capitalist and founder of O'Reilly Media. We're also joined by Orson Aguilar, the president of the Greenlining Institute, Carmen Rojas, the CEO of Workers Lab, and Jim Wunderman, the president and CEO of the Bay Area Council. I'm Joshua Johnson. You can hear more Commonwealth Club programs on the radio, and you'll find links to the club's podcasts and YouTube videos at commonwealthclub.org. Time to go to some of your questions, beginning with one about finding some of those badly needed jobs. One person wrote in, is there an effort underway to survey employers to find out specifically which skills are in demand and mobilize educational institutions to develop new programs matching unemployed or underemployed people, like a fast-track approach? Jim Wunderman?
So we have exactly that program where we're working with our employers to identify the jobs they have today as well as the ones they have in a few years, and at the same time working with the community college system to identify, basically we create a heat map and we'll develop this and put it up online, I think in the next few months. And we've gotten support from a number of foundations and companies to do this, so that those institutions can actually see what the potential is in the future. I met with the new head of the California Community College system a couple of days ago, and he's excited about working with us and our partners to do this. So that's an absolute necessity, is for us to understand better what jobs exist today, what jobs exist tomorrow, and what skills people need, and how to get the resources to upskill themselves to be able to fit into those jobs in the future. And the map provides all that information.
Yeah, California and Florida and a few other states have been pushing harder to grow the role of community colleges in the workforce by allowing them to offer four-year degrees in areas that are in demand.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, it's not a four-year degree that's necessary. In some cases, it's a certificate or a two-year degree. A lot of companies provide a tremendous amount of very specific training. But the key is to offer the coursework and the certificate or the degree that really fits and, and connects well with the four-year universities, the CSUs and the UCs. I think the community colleges are on their way to doing a better job of that, and it's badly needed. And he committed to work with us in the Bay Area as a region to accomplish this.
There's some really interesting education matching experiments. First of all, companies like LinkedIn are doing a lot more work to help match up, well, what are the needed skills? I mean, they recently acquired, an education company, lynda.com, because they see the connection between education and skills development. Companies like Udacity literally are giving people guarantees that if we don't find you a job, that the online education is free. So there are people who are trying to bridge that gap, but we still have a long way to go.
I also think that it's like the challenge from the last conversation about the techno-determinists, that the robots are coming, and this education conversation is taking a real look at our economy. So for every tech job that is created here in the region, we have 5 service sector jobs, 5 bad jobs, 5 janitors, 5 security guards, 5 people who have to work 5 of those jobs to have to pay rent. And I think oftentimes we are so obsessed with thinking about what the future of work looks like without taking into account what the present of work looks like, and actually mapping a course forward that's realistic and saying that, it may not be sexy to be a roofer or a janitor or a driver, but why should you not be a driver and work 40 hours and not be able to feed your kids or not be able to have health care? The amazing thing that I think about Honor is not only that it's a tech company, but that they went from being a 1099 contractor company to realizing that actually employing their workers is what made the difference in the services that they could provide in elder care. I think that that's really critical and oftentimes is missed in the conversation when we're thinking about what the future of the economy and what work looks like.
Can I ask y'all about educating entrepreneurs for a bit about some of these human questions that you're asking? I mean, I get the sense that there are a lot of people who come to places like Silicon Valley and they got big ideas, and of course they're trying to figure out how to build something in as lean a way as possible, which makes sense. They're trying to scale up as quickly as possible, which makes sense. They build a workforce, and then because they're 19 years old and have just been handed $8 million by someone on Page Mill Road, they are new to dealing with the human element of work. They don't understand that if you give someone a steady place to work for 4, 8, 12, 16 years, they will love you, and they will be loyal, and they will give you better work if you give them a stable place to work. They just don't understand how that goes because they're focused on building this company. How do you get entrepreneurs who have set their mind on building a company to be focused on building a workforce instead?
The way that
Orson, do you want to take that on, and then I'll come back to Carmen?
I'd say, again, it starts with the source of the capital, the VCs. So, imagine, if I could have a wish, the VCs would have this racial equity framework in mind where they're going to ask the entrepreneur, so what is your plan to make sure that you have a diverse workforce, right? Because right now we know, we're looking at tech, there's like a 2-2 rule, 2% Latino, 2% Black, is pretty much given in most tech companies in the Bay Area.
Black folk up to 2% now?
I'm being very generous and nice today. That's me. You got me on a good day.
Because I walk in a tech event, and there's a lonely room.
So what if VCs started asking these questions? It's great, how many jobs are you going to create? What's your plan to diversify the workforce? What's your plan to do local hiring? What's your plan to try to give your folks benefits? And by the way, we're going to, if you have a plan, or if you're interested, we're going to give you some support on how to do that because we've created this great back-end system to help you because, one, we recognize that the excuse we hear, right, is there's so much work to do. We're a tiny little startup. We're just trying to be profitable. How can I even think about those things? What if we said those little things are part of your business model? If you can't incorporate that in your business model, then maybe you really don't have a good, solid, and sustainable business model.
Let me get to Carmen and then Jim. Carmen?
No, so I absolutely agree with Orson. So when we started, we invested in a tech company in the South in Tennessee where community college is free that matched students who are graduating from trucking, HVAC systems, with high road employers. And we were the first investor in. We were in $150,000. It wasn't a whole lot of money, young entrepreneur, but it was literally not the entrepreneur, but the investors that came in after us that was like, what is this high road stuff? What do we really care? We just want these people to have a job. We want you to demonstrate value to these companies. And I think that we have a real responsibility to create a different ethos around investment and a different time horizon. Like if we move beyond VCs and look at philanthropic endowment investments or individual investments, and our expectations are just crazy. And we need to reset expectations so that people actually have the bandwidth and the room to say, yeah, I want to be able to hire the janitor that comes to clean our building and pay them a living wage and make sure that they have benefits, because I want the janitor to be able to thrive. I want the janitor to be able to imagine being the administrative assistant, and then the administrative assistant imagine being the program assistant. Like, I think that there's, the incentives are so mismatched. Orson, yeah.
You know, on the
Actually, let me get to Jim and then I'll come back.
sure,
Go ahead,
okay.
Jim.
So about 13, 14 years ago, the Bay Area Council did something that I think was one of the greatest things that we did. And I regret it was a little before I showed up, so I can't take credit for it. But I would. But we created a process called the Bay Area Family of Funds, a series of investment funds that were designed just about what Orson said. So we raised, because we have companies who have capital and banks and others, we raised a total of about $225 million in several separate funds. One was called the Bay Area Equity Fund, another was called the Smart Growth Fund. We actually had two of those. And we hired very professional fund managers with the specific goal of having social impact as an outcome, along with financial return, market rate financial return. The Bay Area Equity Fund, for example, invested in companies you're familiar with called Tesla, Solar City, Pandora, which not only made great music, but brought music back to the Oakland School District as one of the requirements of its investment. Revolution Foods, which by its very nature bring healthy food into schools. So each portfolio company that received an investment had to stipulate what community activities it would engage in, what training programs, who it would hire, keep score of all this, which we did as part of our responsibility for working with the fund manager on that. And I think overall it was, we didn't do everything right. In these things you don't invest in every right company, but it was really the birth of social impact investing, which has taken pretty good hold. We focused it on the Bay Area. Some folks would like to invest in a broader category. I think it's time, and we're thinking about the next era of this and what would be meaningful in 2016 and 2020 as to how to do this in a way that will produce an even better set of outcomes and a better society and a more competitive Bay Area, because it is the opportunity is to have business, the people who work and are associated with the business, and the stakeholders, the community around the businesses, come together to create a more competitive opportunity. Ultimately, business is very competitive. What we face is, our businesses have to compete more effectively than folks whose businesses are somewhere else. And if we're going to spend more money and we're going to invest more, we have to be smarter and more effective. I think in a lot of cases we're doing it, and we can do it better.
Tim O'Reilly, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I guess a couple of things. When you said that young entrepreneur is getting investment, think about if you hire employees that are going to be there with you for 15, 20 years, they're going to love you. I would lay odds that most young investors, young entrepreneurs, do not imagine that they will have a company in 15 or 20 years. They're imagining they're going to sell it in 3 or 4 years, and they're going to move on to something else. And that's part of the problem. I think we've really focused too much of our ideas of entrepreneurship on the venture capital going into this fast growth company with a quick flip. And yes, some of them imagine, yes, we'll become a great company like Google or Facebook that'll be around for the long haul, but that isn't the dominant model in Silicon Valley. And I think we need actually, in our policy making and in our narrative, we need to value slow growth businesses, smaller businesses, way more than we talk about the big high-growth venture capital businesses. They are important, but small businesses are what make like a city great. When I had a recent conversation with somebody from the White House, they were planning Obama's entrepreneurship summit, and they said, "What Silicon Valley, VC should we have?" And I said, I think you should have. We're having lunch in Boot and Shoe Service. I said, you should have someone like Charlie Hallowell. He's created 3 great restaurants here in Oakland. There are, there's all kinds of little businesses here that make us say, wow, this is a great city. And it's the thousands of people who are making small businesses who actually give a character to a city where we make, that's wonderful. Why aren't we investing more in that?
I got to ask you about Oakland, because that's one of the things I love about Oakland, where you will applaud for a restaurateur. I think that's really cool. And Orson, you mentioned Oakland as when I asked you what's the ideal future, a place where a city like Oakland can maintain its diversity. It has seemed to me, from covering this region, that we expect Oakland to be diverse and fight to stay that way. And we expect San Francisco not really to fight for its Black and Hispanic residents. It's going to be really tough. We've got this inexorable gentrification. Money is flowing in. I get this attitude from a lot of people that we don't know where we're going to go. I guess we're going to have to move to Concord. I guess we're going to have to move to Antioch. I guess we're going to have to move to Stockton or Sacramento, because we'll try to get in Oakland, but then we're going to have to end up somewhere else. I get the feeling that the groundswell of the fight to keep the city diverse is way hotter in Oakland than it is in San Francisco. Is San Francisco getting a pass? Are we allowing Oakland to be the more diverse cousin on the East Bay, and San Francisco can just do what it wants to do? Because, they can be diverse over there. We're just going to do whatever the big businesses tell us to do. Is San Francisco getting a pass?
I'm not sure if San Francisco is getting a pass. I think what everybody definitely is saying is we don't want that to happen here. So there definitely is a compare and contrast. Here's an interesting thing that's happening. So some of us are organizing around taking collective action around how do we ensure that what happens here with tech looks different, right? Starting from a place of positivity and just looking at all the... And what we're doing is starting to engage folks across the Bay, because there's a lot of lessons learned that they've had. And so if we can coalesce together and say, what have you learned? Because it's, the folks that are working in San Francisco probably live in Oakland or Richmond if they're lucky. All right. Now, if they're lucky, maybe they live in Tracy, and if they're lucky, 5 years from now, they might get to live in Manteca. I'm not sure. It's getting really bad out there.
Salt Lake City.
But my point is, there is this growing effort of folks that want to work together and say, hey, we're all in this together. We're in this dynamic region. A city alone can't do it. And you see some great tables of funders and others collaborating on saying, what's the gig economy going to look like? And it's a regional effort. It's not just a city effort. And so that's happening. And I would say it's not that we've forgotten. It's about we don't want to become like that. And you got to always motivate. It's like you got to show the villain in every story to motivate people. So that's the villain now that will motivate people to do something different in Oakland.
All right, let's focus on audience questions. We got a bunch of great questions, and I'm going to try and get in as many as we can before our time is up. Please keep them coming. I'm going to go read through as many as possible. Some of the questions are thematic, so I'm going to combine them if I may. One person wrote, automation can also be progressive. It can liberate us from work. John Maynard Keynes once predicted a 4-hour work week. Tim Ferriss seems to be selling books on that premise. How far away are we from a world with little work? How do we get there? Another person wrote, Amazon is exploring a 30-hour work week, Sweden a 6-hour work day. Should the future of work be shorter work days and work weeks? Should we accelerate automation to free us from more compulsory work?
People are working less hours. So in the region, most hourly workers aren't working full-time, are barely working enough hours to get by. So this idea that less hours is better in a context where there is no social safety net is deeply problematic. So in Sweden, you can have a 6-hour workday because you get a year off for maternity leave, because you have paid sick leave, you have subsidized health care. There's a role that government plays in partnership with our economy to make the lives of everyday people good and sustainable and thriving. And I think when we disconnect these economic or workplace ambitions from the role that government needs to play to create a thriving environment, it's really problematic.
Yeah, you can only have a shorter work week if you pay people more
That's
for
right.
the hours that they work. And I think that is actually a really good solution if we put, as Carmen says, put all the pieces together, the benefits. Right now you work less than 30 hours a week, you don't get any benefits, even if you have a traditional job. We need to change some of the regulatory frameworks around that, but mostly we need to go, okay, let's figure out how we get more of the money, of the wealth that we're creating in the hands of ordinary people, because without that, the whole system ultimately breaks down. I mean, my whole journey into this, from just being, I'm a technology guy, was from a guy named Nick Hanauer, who gave a talk at TEDU back in 2012, and he said, "Look, I'm a rich capitalist. I was the first non-family investor at Amazon, and so on and so forth." And he said, "But I can only sleep on one bed. I can only eat out so much. The fact that I'm, worth all this money doesn't actually help the economy. When are people like me going to realize that capital doesn't create jobs, customers create jobs, and we've been screwing workers for so long that they're not going to afford to be our customers anymore, and we've got to reverse that. And it's so true. Consumer demand is 70% of the economy. And, we keep assuming that somehow somebody else will pay these people so they can be our customers. It's this crazy fantasy that, well, I'll cut all my costs. I'll pay, my people, substandard wages, but somebody else will somehow afford to be, customers. And it's going to break down at some point.
Here's a question that comes from a small business owner who has a company with 9 employees. Employers of small businesses could employ more people if they weren't burdened with payroll taxes, workers' comp insurance rates, etc. The best policy changes would make it easier and cheaper to hire people and less scary to fire those who don't work out. The regulations strangle growth, but can they be undone? What could be done for a business owner like this?
They are being undone. Uber is undoing it, right? So we have more 1099 contract workers now than ever in their history. 60% of our workers in the country are 1099 contract employees. So it is being undone. To Tim's point, what does that mean for our country? What does that mean for the future workforce in our country when people need to cobble together these random hours in order to make ends meet?
I want to answer the question about...
Yeah, I definitely want you to take this one.
First of all, I want the job with the less hours. I want to be clear about that for myself. But we have a lot of problems in the society, and the image of people working less, but people not working at all, is disjointed. So I think we have to address some of these bigger issues first. How we do it, we need to be smart and figure that out. The biggest complaint we have from our employers is this issue of overregulation, overtaxation, overcost, and making California uncompetitive for middle-class jobs. So what a lot of our members do is they have lots of folks, lots of folks who earn on the high end, and then, as Carmen says, that creates a lot of work for folks who earn on the lower end, and we're losing the middle class, and we're having a hard time housing folks to go with it. So it's creating a state with largely a great economy and the greatest amount of poverty in the country at the same time. So I do believe that we need to look at this realistically and see what the implications are of all of these rules and whether they make sense. A lot of these laws got passed over decades, and just heap it on the regulations, and a legislator needs to pass a law to, on a real issue. So the reason these laws get passed is because there is some real thing that's happening that needs to get addressed. And unto itself, it probably makes sense. But when you add it all up, from the point of view of the facilities person who has to look at the economics and recommend decisions about where to locate the next manufacturing plant or the next facility of whatever kind, they take these things into consideration. And California is considered to be one of the most overly burdensome, legally risky places to operate. And I hear it all the time. And when we complain about it, folks say, yeah, but look how good we're doing. That's nonsense. We've added all these jobs and so forth. But we're not adding, I think, all of the right kind of jobs to address the conversation that we're having.
So give me an example of something that the state of California or even regional governments in the Bay Area, if they decided to put their heads together and pursue one plan, could do to ease this. I think it's easy for people to hear too many regulations and they presume that we just want to kind of rake the whole safety net out from under people. But is there something simple?
I think it's simple. I think you should have less departments with clearer rules about how to create, for example, a facility that someone would want to open. So companies are they're in a competitive rush to get things going. And what we've heard for a hospital, for example, now we need hospitals here because the people are here. To get a hospital conceived and up and running in many parts of the country takes about 2 years. From the time you think, we'll finance, capitalize, and develop and populate this hospital, it's 2 years. In California, it's 6 to 8 years. That's the difference in time because of the rules that we have here. So, if it's a choice, you might end up with a hospital in a different location. Well, that applies to many other industries as well. So when it comes, if you want to, the plant that for the battery manufacturing that Tesla created, where they decided to do that, in Nevada rather than in the Bay Area, which we urged them to do. I can't tell you how much we urged them to do it. In the end, they could just do it so much faster and more competitively in Nevada that they chose to do it. Now, that was a lot of middle-class jobs that went up there with that, and I think it's a shame. We need to be realistic about this.
We've been getting a number of questions about possible solutions, your dream ideas, your maybe pie-in-the-sky ideas is a little too strong, but your dream ideas. And this one mentions Colin Kaepernick, so I'm going to go ahead and ask it. That's just, I appreciate the creativity it takes to throw in Colin Kaepernick into the Commonwealth Club, so 10 points to you, whoever you are. Let's say you get a golden ticket of funding, resources, support. A Colin Kaepernick-esque individual gives a windfall of support for increasing economic mobility and empowerment. What would those resources or next steps look like? What would be the number one highest priority? If you got all the money from those extra Kaepernick jerseys that's being sold, where would you spend it first? Orson?
I'd fund small businesses. Every time I talk to a young person, I talked to a young woman today who's looking for work and wish she had more hours at her job. And she says, my goal is to be an entrepreneur. I have these ideas. And so whenever I talk to young people, they want to be entrepreneurs. They want to work for themselves. So I would fund the riskiest VC fund out there, fund folks that want to create jobs, give them the support, and we have the capital to do that kind of stuff.
Tim?
I agree that you should fund small businesses, but I wouldn't do it on risky VC things. I would just try to find things that people need. I think of somebody I know, she's a hairdresser. She's trying to get together her business to set up her own studio so she can capture more of the income. She's thinking she's going to have to leave Oakland. She's actually thinking moving to another part of the country because she can't, make enough to continue her work. There are people doing services, but there are also businesses that are simply utility, for other people. I started my business with $500. I did not need venture capital because I actually had something better. I had customers. Mm-hmm. I started publishing books about technology and selling them to people who wanted them. And we created billions of dollars of value for society. People started companies. I've had a bunch of billionaires say, "Oh yeah, I started with an O'Reilly book," and But what we did was we just said, here's a need. And I guess I would just say the cult of the high growth, big win, hit business is kind of a financial lottery mindset. And we have to get away from that and start investing in real businesses. When Silicon Valley was built. It was not a lottery. It was actually this new industry that was being built. And something like the solar investment that you're talking about. China basically took that challenge way before we did, and they built a big business, a huge industry, and we're now playing catch up. Climate change is going to be a huge, huge opportunity solving that problem, and it's going to be a problem it's going to be a solution not just for high-tech businesses, but for low-tech businesses, and we should be doing all of those things.
Carmen, if Kaepernick dropped the jersey money on you, what would you do with it?
I would give it to fund good jobs here in Oakland. I am really excited about the work that Inner City Advisors and Fund Good Jobs does, not only to invest in small businesses, but to create a standard, like this idea that you can have a small business that creates opportunity for people, that creates good jobs, that creates mobility. This, I think it's a model for what we should, our ambition should be like in the places that we live, where, Keba Conte, who opened a coffee shop next door to my office, could actually do it, has the money, and the people who work there can work there full time and have access to benefits and can do things on the side, right? This is not the people aren't cobbling together side hustles. They can actually just work so that they can hang out with their families afterwards. And so that's that's what I would do.
Jim?
Yeah.
I'm sure some of your companies have Colin Kaepernick money, but if they had a little bit more.
Well, the 49ers have something to do with it. Well, look, first of all, your radio listeners can't tell, but if I could grow hair like Kaepernick, I would do that, first of all, with a big blue stripe across the top. But I'll tell you that now. For the folks who...
I hope it would not cost all of the Kaepernick money for you to do that.
No. For the folks who know me, what I believe is demonstrated is I would invest the money in early childhood programs.
Yeah.
I think that is the dividing. That is, you start at the beginning when kids are even before they're born. Prenatal systems, talk, read, and sing, something that we really are trying to push hard, starting right here in Oakland, and get kids, help with their early brain development. Make sure that every kid has an equal chance, and we're so far away from that. And it's so unfair that, talk about privilege for one child to have such opportunity and such a vocabulary at such a young age, and other kids struggling, from 12 months, from the time they can talk, 16 months, 24 months, by the time they get to kindergarten, it's more or less game over, and you're in remediation. What a terrible mistake, and we could fix this. And so I don't know if the Kaepernick jerseys are quite enough to buy that, but I think that's something we need to rethink as a society and reinvest. We've been pushing for this, and we've made some improvements, but we are so far away from it one of these days.
Bob Putnam, the author, once said to me, he said, every great advance in our country has come when we've invested in other people's children. And it's a wonderful thought, it's just, you're so right.
Another question from the audience. Would a universal basic income empower people to seek more meaningful work and raise the floor on our safety net to ensure against automation? This idea has been getting kicked around that eventually automation could take away so many jobs that we would have to give people income because so many of the jobs they would ordinarily be doing would cease to exist, and there would be a dearth of jobs for the people who need them. What might that look like in our future? Is that kind of an overly idealistic idea, or might that have some legs? Carmen, what do you think? A universal basic income?
So I often talk about universal basic income from the perspective of summer job programs. So everybody knows these summer job programs, big corporations pull together money, or foundations put together money, give it to a city and say, hey, we want to make sure that young, mostly Black and Latino kids in your city have access to jobs in the summer because it's going to make them better people. And oftentimes, my nephew just actually finished the summer job program, and he worked at Subway. And I thought the whole time, is that the kind of job that we want our young people to be prepared for? Making sandwiches? And wouldn't it be better if my nephew would have just gotten a check for $4,000 or $5,000 for the summer to do whatever he felt like doing? Skateboard, take a summer class, work at a community organization, be able to expand the aperture of his lived experience in ways, in the same ways that rich kids in this country get to. And I think that when we move away, when we think like tactically about the ways in which government gives money to certain populations, it's totally possible and feasible. I think it's something that we should explore. I think it is a way to free people up to move out of the jobs that are crappy jobs and into the realm of possibility of experience.
Orson?
Yeah, I think the idea of a universal income is problematic, one, because you're talking about a big pot of money we don't have. So why don't we drive, if there is a big pot of money, to the populations that need work the most, right? We know if you looked at a map of the region, you can see the hot spots where if you can put an influx of capital and put people to work. So this idea of universal doesn't work because not everybody needs it, and some need it more. So why not just practice more equity in doing how you distribute your dollars? I was a kid in East LA. My first job was with the Summer Youth Employment Program. My first job was at a swimming pool where they got the young people to do the dirtiest jobs that the lifeguards didn't want to do, right? So I was cleaning toilets. I was taking stuff out of the pool that shouldn't be in the pool because people would come in at night. And I look back at that and I treasure those. Like, that's what made me, right? It made me, and it made me realize that somebody's always going to have to do that work. Thank God I was able to go to college and I'm not stuck there. But it made me realize that there are folks that do that work, and some of that work cannot be automated, and we need to treat those folks with dignity and respect. So I think a job, as long as you're not stuck there, can really teach you something. Making sandwiches could perhaps teach you something about teamwork, about how to not make a bad sandwich. So I think people just want a job. You know, if you got a job, people aren't going to complain.
Another one of our audience members wrote, "There's little diversity at most growing tech companies in terms of age. What incentives can be aimed at CEOs to change this?" This goes back a little bit to our conversation about incentivizing companies to make socially conscious decisions. The whole age gap, that seems to be kind of a tough nut to crack in some companies. Is there anything we can do about that, so people who have been in the workforce for a long time don't feel like there is no future for them in the workforce, at least in tech?
You know, again, on the issue of regulations, I think, you know, I have deep respect for older people, now being one of them. But, but you know, we do provide protection, work protection for people who are older relative to people who are younger. And so it's less risk in hiring a younger person for an employer than an older person. Now, I think younger people, you know, I think of my kids and the skills they have. If you are a tech company and you want to hire somebody, do not hire me. But you could definitely hire my kids because they are born and raised with this mentality that I lack. And so I think that's just a reality that, you know, younger people have, you know, these abilities that older folks lack. But I think that as people are getting older and we're living longer, it's unrealistic that people are expected to retire in their late 50s or early 60s and so forth. I think people just have too much to offer for that, and I think it would be a boon to the economy to have people working longer. And you know, one time it was seen that by working longer, we're keeping younger people out of the workforce, but I'm not so sure that that's true anymore. So, you know, I think we should design more incentives for people to work longer in their lives and hire those folks because they have so much to offer. And at the same time, not make it a risk for an employer to do it. It was much of a risk. I think you still have to protect people, but there's got to be a better way than what I've seen.
I wonder if there are, and granted, I know they are vastly different sets of challenges in terms of improving gender diversity and racial and cultural diversity and age diversity and life experience diversity at companies, diversity among people with veteran status or people from different backgrounds. I know they're very different kinds of problems to solve. Do you find that there are certain kinds of tactics and techniques that generally work best to improve diversity at companies? Is it more a matter of money? I mean, I know there are some companies I can think of one, Disney ABC Television, that has a program that actually hires minority and female directors and producers to work on shows, and then hires a legacy director to work alongside them. So they're basically hired to shadow somebody new, which gets someone new into the pipeline and prevents the legacy person from losing their job. And so they've decided to do it just with cash. They put millions of dollars in and they diversify. Does it always take money? Like, do you find that there's another way that doesn't cost a boatload of money that is also effective, or do we just need to decide to drop the dollars on the table? Is there anything else that works? I have stumped the panel. I'm so
I think
proud.
more importantly, it takes making the decision. It takes, I mirror you, that's you. I think it's more of a mindset of people who want to do this. And if they want to do this, they'll make it happen without the boatloads of money, is from what I've seen. And so the question to me is always, how do we infiltrate those minds so that they have the desire to do this? And I don't know, we haven't found how we do that, right? Is it Colin Kaepernick, maybe? Is it a song? Is it a poem? What's the technology that might, but I think it's more of getting people to decide that that's important, and then they'll figure out how to do these programs, and then they'll convince government or policymakers to subsidize that with our taxpayer dollars.
We did a study we produced recently. It's on gender practices, best practices in the workforce. So you could get that on our website at the Bay Area Council. We released it a few weeks ago, and so there's a number of things that companies are doing in this area, and learning from each other. What we're doing is probably the best way. It's a cultural change, and so some companies are out ahead of others, and getting serious about issues around diversity and making a commitment and beginning to change that culture. And it starts at the top and works its way through the organization. I know at Intel, when they hire a position in management, the manager has to ask the question, could we have hired a woman for this particular job, because they're committed to this. And so, I think it gets into the heads of the leadership to say, why couldn't we have hired a woman for this? Were there no applicants? And maybe that doesn't solve the whole problem, but it gets people thinking and gets people to own it.
Thank you to all of you who submitted questions. We're almost out of time, so I have to wrap this up, and I know there's a lot more that we could have talked about. We could have talked about taxation rates. We could have talked about setting wages, helping people on the fringes of society, the formerly homeless, the mentally ill, veterans who are trying to get back into the workforce, protecting people from being automated out of work, gentrification. There's another question that came up there. Thank you all for submitting these questions, and I'm going to try to wrap this up, hopefully, with something hopeful. It's going to take a lot of work, possibly, and time to solve these issues. What gives you the most hope that we will get this done? Is there something you've seen, an opportunity being seized, a source of progress that reassures you that everything's going to work out? Let me go down the line and just hear from everyone. Jim, if I could start with you, what gives you the most hope that we're going to solve this?
Well, first of all, conversations like this, cities like Oakland that have a determination to improve life, but for everybody. And I think in the business world, what I'm seeing, and it's especially in the last few years, is there's just a growing recognition and a sense of determination amongst many, many businesses, and it's spreading. That we have to address these issues, and we have to create more opportunities for diverse people. That we have to promote women and minorities into leadership. That that we're all in this together. And I think when companies begin to really take hold of this, that gives me a lot of confidence that it can be done, because business employs most people.
Carmen?
The fact that there are 3 of the 4 of us that said small business is the most promising thing that we should, if we had our Kaepernick druthers, that we would invest it in small businesses, that there is, as Jim mentioned, sort of these kinds of conversations and these opportunities for alignment, and frankly, just the ability to dig into somebody else's perspective, right? Like we just met, and I think that there is an appetite both regionally and nationally to have more of these conversations that are focused on identifying solutions as well as identifying our role in moving towards those solutions, so that it's not something abstract, but it's something very tactical and practical, the things that we do day to day that help take back our democracy and improve our economy for working people.
Tim?
The thing that gives me the most hope is a sense of history. Every time we've introduced a new wave of technology, we've started by putting people out of work. But then we figured out how to use that technology to do things that were previously impossible, and we actually ended up making everybody wealthier. And we're in that very uncomfortable time right now, where we've got all these new capabilities, we've blown up a lot of the old stuff, and we haven't figured out yet what's the new stuff we're going to build. And we are at the point, though, where we're starting to think about it. And the fact that discussions like this one are happening everywhere really are a sign that people are figuring out that the current economy is broken and that we need to build a next economy that's going to work better. And there are a lot of people who are devoted to that. And just as, the Victorian era, went through this, really this moral revolution and said, oh my gosh, we got to stop doing this child labor thing. We got to ban the slave trade. We've got to reform what we're doing. And they started to build a much more prosperous society. And I think we have that opportunity today. And I think we are starting, as as a world, to step up to that challenge and to say, okay, wait a minute, we just can't have a race to the bottom where more and more people are paid less and expected to do more, live more and more risky lives. We got to fix this. And that awakening is the first step towards fixing it.
Orson?
What gives me hope is that we know how to do this. This is, we don't have to wait for a robot to be designed to tell us how to do it. We have the practices there, right? Jim mentioned the funds that you did, the work Carmen is doing, the stuff we're doing from a VC, the fact that we have business leaders talking about this. And so what gives me hope is that we have a toolkit, we have ideas. Some are old that just need to kind of be taken off that shelf, dusted, painted pink, and put some free starburst on the window, and it's going to work. And so we have great ideas that we've tried here, ideas that have been tried in other countries, have been working now. And so we just need to trust that some of those ideas could work again, not be so arrogant to think that we have to innovate the new idea, because a lot of great ideas are there. And finally, the last thing that gives me hope is that young people want to see something different, right? I work with a lot of young people at Greenlining through our Leadership Academy, but not just them. I'm meeting a lot of older people who are also saying we need to do something different, because it can't be the young versus the old, or us versus them, or a winner or loser mentality. It's more folks really saying we're in this together and we have the ideas. Let's just figure out how to take them to mass scale.
That's Orson Aguilar, the president of the Greenlining Institute, Tim O'Reilly, venture capitalist and the founder of O'Reilly Media, Carmen Rojas, the CEO of Workers Lab, and Jim Wunderman, the president and CEO of the Bay Area Council. Thank you all for being here. Much appreciated. This program has been sponsored by the San Francisco Foundation and is part of the Foundation series. Thank you, San Francisco Foundation. And is part of the Foundation series focused on people, place, and power in the Bay Area. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and online, and thanks to everyone here at the Commonwealth Club. Thanks to Spur Oakland for hosting us. I'm Joshua Johnson, and this meeting of the Commonwealth Club of California, the place where you're in the know, is adjourned. Good night, everybody.